Emily Carter never expected one small moment to change how she saw her quiet neighborhood forever. It happened on an ordinary Sunday evening, the kind where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. The weather was calm, the sun was fading behind the roofs, and the air outside smelled like early autumn. Emily was closing her living room curtains, ready to settle down with a cup of tea, when something across the street caught her eye. It was just a light turning on inside the Hale household, her neighbors, Ryan and Claire. She saw their house every day, not because she was watching them, but because her window directly faced theirs. But that night, something about the soft glow of their lamp made her pause for a second longer. And in that second, she saw him, Ryan Hale, standing in his living room with someone she didn't recognize. It wasn't his wife. The woman was younger, maybe in her late 20s, with long brown hair that fell over her shoulder as she laughed at something he said. She stepped closer to him, too close for Emily to pretend it was innocent. Ryan brushed a loose strand of hair away from the woman's face in a gentle way that looked practiced, familiar, intimate. Emily felt her breath tighten. She wasn't close friends with Ryan, but she knew enough about him to feel a sudden ache in her chest. He was the kind of man who helped neighbors shovel snow in winter. He carried groceries for the older couple down the street. He waved at kids riding their bikes. Emily had always thought he was a good husband, too married to Claire, the sweet woman who baked cookies for everyone during the holidays. So why did he look so comfortable with someone who wasn't his wife? Emily knew she should turn away. This was personal. This wasn't her business. But for a moment, she simply froze, unable to make sense of what she was seeing. The woman beside Ryan said something, and he smiled in that soft, warm way Emily had seen 100 times before, the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. And that was exactly what hurt. Emily didn't want to care. She didn't even fully understand why she cared. But there was a strange, sharp feeling in her chest, as if someone had cracked open something she had tried to ignore for months. She had always admired Ryan's kindness, his easy personality, the gentle way he spoke to everyone. She would never have crossed any lines, never even admitted those feelings to herself. But seeing him with another woman, not his wife, made something inside her collapse a little. Before she could look away, the scene shifted. The woman picked up her bag and walked toward the hallway as if she knew the house well. She didn't act like a stranger or a visitor. She acted like someone who had been there before. Someone comfortable. Emily stepped back slightly, her heart pounding. She knew she shouldn't be watching that. But she couldn't change what she had already seen. And then Claire walked into the room. Emily expected shock or confusion. She expected raised voices or questions. But Claire didn't react like that at all. She walked into the empty space the woman had just left. She looked around with tired eyes, the kind of eyes that held disappointment deeper than anger. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She looked like a woman who had already lived through this moment many times. Emily felt a wave of sadness wash over her. Claire didn't yell. She didn't break down. She simply stood there, quiet and still, as if she were trying to collect the pieces of her heart before they fell apart completely. Ryan walked back into the room a second later. His expression changed the moment he saw Claire. He straightened up. His smile faded, and for a brief second, Emily saw guilt flicker across his face. He didn't touch Claire. He didn't try to explain. He didn't say anything Emily could read from her distance. And Claire didn't move toward him either. It was like watching two people who used to be close, but now lived on opposite sides of the same room. Emily finally pulled her curtains shut, feeling heat rise in her face, a mixture of embarrassment and heartbreak. She wasn't supposed to know any of this. She wasn't supposed to see the quiet pain inside a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was none of her business. But the moment clung to her thoughts like a shadow. That wouldn't leave. She sat on her couch with her tea growing cold beside her. All she could think about was Claire's face, tired, resigned, hurting in a way that felt too familiar. Emily remembered her own past relationship, the one that ended after years of quiet distance and unspoken disappointments. She had promised herself she would never judge someone else's marriage because no one really knew what happened behind closed doors. But tonight, she had seen it right there, framed perfectly in her window. She wished she hadn't. She wished she could go back 10 minutes and close the curtains earlier. The guilt settled heavily in her stomach, mixing with something she didn't want to name disappointment in Ryan, a man she had respected and maybe admired a little too much. She tried to distract herself by picking up a book, but the words didn't make sense. She tried to turn on the TV, but the noise only made her more restless. She walked into the kitchen, then back into the living room, pacing as if movement could erase the memory. But no matter how many times she told herself it wasn't her place to think about it, one simple truth remained. Claire already knew. That realization was the part that hurt the most. Claire didn't look shocked because she wasn't discovering something new. She was living a truth she had carried alone for who knows how long. And Emily, without wanting to, had stepped straight into the middle of it. She felt sad for Claire. She felt disappointed in Ryan, and she felt confused about her own heart. Why it hurt more than it should. Why it felt personal even when it WASN single quotes to Emily finally turned off the lights and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Claire standing in that quiet room, and Ryan looking away like a man who didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. And Emily realized something she didn't want to admit. This moment, this single mistake of looking through the window was going to stay with her much longer than she expected. The days after that Sunday evening felt heavier than usual for Emily. She tried to focus on her work at the middle school, teaching her students about reading and writing. But her mind kept circling back to what she had seen. Every morning when she left for work, she avoided looking across the street, afraid she might see Ryan or Claire and not know how to act. She didn't want to be involved in someone else's marriage, especially one that already seemed fragile. But the image of Claire's tired eyes stayed with her. The way a quiet song lingers long after it stops playing. She told herself she would not talk about it. She would not think about it. She would move on. But guilt has a way of finding someone even when they avoid it. And on Wednesday evening, just as she was making dinner, there was a gentle knock at her door. Emily froze. Something inside her whispered a name. Before she opened the door, Claire, and she was right. Claire stood on her doorstep wearing a soft gray sweater and a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her hair was tied back loosely and her shoulders looked tense, as if she had spent hours debating whether she should come over at all. Double quotes, "Hi, Emily," she said softly. "Do you have a moment?" Emily nodded, stepping aside. Her heart was beating fast and she wasn't sure what to expect. Claire sat on the couch, looking around the room as if trying to gather courage from the quiet space. Emily handed her a cup of tea and sat across from her, keeping her hands folded to avoid showing how nervous she felt. After a long moment, Claire spoke. "I saw you the other night," she said calmly. "At your window?" Emily felt her breath catch. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Claire gently lifted her hand to stop her. "Don't be sorry," Claire said. "You didn't do anything wrong." The room fell into a hush, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, but was filled with things waiting to be said. Claire looked down at her tea, turning the cup slowly between her hands. "Ryan and I? We've been having problems for longer than I like to admit." Her voice wavered slightly, but she kept going. "It's not one thing. It's years of small hurts, busy schedules, long nights, and not enough talking. We became distant without even noticing." Emily listened quietly, her heart aching for her. Claire wasn't defensive or angry. She was simply tired, emotionally drained in a way that was impossible to hide. "I knew about the woman before you saw her," Claire continued. "I knew something was wrong. The late nights, the strange excuses, the way he pulled away when I tried to get close." She took a small breath. "I didn't want to admit it. Sometimes it's easier to ignore the truth and face what it means." Emily looked at her with gentle eyes. "I didn't mean to see anything." "I wish no," Claire said again. "You didn't hurt me. If anything, what happened made me realize something I'd been avoiding." Emily tilted her head slightly. "What do you mean?" Claire's eyes finally lifted to meet hers, and they were filled with vulnerability and strength at the same time. "I've been holding on to a version of Ryan that doesn't exist anymore. she said. I kept hoping he would wake up one day and remember how we used to love each other. But I can't keep waiting for someone to choose me. Emily felt a lump in her throat. She could see the courage it took for Claire to admit all of this. Claire continued. When I saw you that night, the way you looked so hurt and shocked, it reminded me that this isn't just my burden. His choices are affecting other people too. People who believed in him, who thought he was better than this. Emily swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say without crossing boundaries, so she just listened. Claire smiled sadly. I came here because I needed someone to hear me. I haven't talked to anyone about this. Not a friend. Not family. I didn't want the world to know my marriage was falling apart. She paused. But seeing you look so upset made me realize I shouldn't be hiding anymore. Emily gently placed her tea on the table. Claire, whatever you decide to do, you're strong enough to face it. You deserve to be valued. Claire nodded slowly. I think it's time I stop pretending everything is fine. I don't want to live in silence anymore. They talked for nearly an hour, sharing quiet moments, small confessions, and pieces of their own heartbreak. Claire told her how she and Ryan met, how things changed, and how she kept hoping the distance between them would close on its own. Emily shared how she had experienced something similar years ago, how emotional neglect can feel heavier than anger. When Claire stood up to leave, she looked lighter in a way, still hurt, but stronger, as if she finally gave herself permission to feel the truth. Emily walked her to the door, offering a soft smile. Thank you for listening, Claire said. I didn't expect to say all that, but it feels good not to hold it alone. You'll be okay, Emily said gently. Whatever choice you make will be the right one. Claire nodded and stepped outside. But before she walked away, she turned back with a strange, almost hesitant expression. There's something else, she said. Ryan told me. He saw you too. Emily's heart dropped. He what? He saw you at the window, Claire explained quietly. He didn't know what you saw, but he noticed you watching. And she paused. I think he's planning to talk to you. Emily felt a rush of anxiety. She had no idea why Ryan would want to talk to her. What could he possibly say? What did he expect from her? Claire seemed to sense her worry. She offered a small, reassuring smile. Just be honest, she said softly. Ryan needs to face the truth. And maybe hearing it from someone outside the marriage will make him see things differently. With that, Claire walked back across the street, leaving Emily standing in her doorway. Her mind spinning with questions she didn't want to ask. Emily shut the door, leaning against it for support. She felt the weight of what Claire had shared, the pain of a woman trying to rebuild her strength. But now another weight sat on her chest, the knowledge that Ryan was going to come to her. She didn't know what he would say. She didn't know what she wanted to hear. But one thing was certain. The situation was no longer something she could ignore. Soon, the truth would cross the street, and she didn't know what that truth would bring. Ryan came to Emily's door on a cold Friday evening. At a time when the neighborhood was quiet and the sky had just faded into deep blue. Emily was in the kitchen finishing dinner when she heard the knock, slow, heavy, almost hesitant. She knew instantly it wasn't a delivery or a neighbor asking for sugar. Her heart tightened because she knew exactly who it was. She opened the door. There he stood, Ryan, hale, looking nothing like the confident, friendly man she was used to seeing. His shoulders were tense, his eyes tired. And for the first time since she moved into the neighborhood, he looked unsure of himself. Emily, can we talk? He asked. His voice was low, careful. Like someone trying not to break something fragile. Emily stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She didn't want this conversation inside her home. They stood on her porch, the cool air brushing past them, filling the silence between their breaths. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, Ryan said, running his hand through his hair. I need to explain. Emily crossed her arms, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know where to put her hands or her feelings. He looked at her with a quiet sincerity she hadn't expected. I know you saw something that night, and I know Claire talked to you. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm not going to pretend you misunderstood anything." Emily kept her eyes steady. "Then why are you here, Ryan?" He looked down at his shoes for a moment, then back at her. "Because I never wanted you to see me like that. You're one of the people in this neighborhood who always treated me kindly, without expecting anything. I never wanted to lose your respect." His words surprised her. Respect wasn't what she expected him to care about. But the more she looked at him, the more she realized he wasn't here to justify what he had done. He was here because guilt had finally reached him in a way he couldn't ignore. "Ryan," she said softly, "this isn't about me. Your marriage or choices, they're not my place to fix." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I know I've hurt Claire. I know she deserves better. But when I saw you at the window, it felt like the world was telling me to stop running from what I've done. You looked disappointed. And I guess that hit me harder than I thought it would." Emily felt a strange mix of sadness and frustration. She didn't want to be part of this story. She didn't want to be a mirror showing him the pieces of himself he had been avoiding. "You shouldn't be thinking about my disappointment," she said quietly. "You should be thinking about hers." Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. "I am. I have been. Claire's been hurting for a long time. And instead of facing it, I tried to escape into something that made me feel wanted again." He opened his eyes, and they were filled with regret. "It wasn't love. It wasn't meaningful. It was me trying to avoid the truth." Emily swallowed, feeling the sharp sting of empathy. "Then why didn't you talk to her? Why let things get this far?" He shrugged slightly, though the movement looked painful. "Because admitting you're the reason something is falling apart is harder than pretending everything is fine. I kept hoping the distance would fix itself. But it only got worse." They both fell silent. The street lights flickered on, casting soft yellow circles across the road. The world felt still, like it was waiting for them to finish a conversation that should have happened long ago. "Claire told me to choose myself," Ryan said after a long pause. "She didn't yell. She didn't blame me. She just spoke the truth. And hearing it from her was hard. But knowing you saw everything too," he shook his head, "it pushed me to face it." Emily leaned against the railing, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her chest. "Ryan, listen to me," she said gently. "I'm not who you should be looking for answers from. I can't tell you what to do. But what I can tell you is this: Claire deserves honesty. And you deserve the chance to fix your mistakes. But that starts with going home, not coming here." He nodded, but she could tell it wasn't easy for him to accept. "Emily," he whispered, almost afraid of the words, "I never wanted to pull you into this. You didn't ask for it. But somehow you became the reminder I needed." Emily looked away for a moment, feeling a quiet ache. She understood now Ryan wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for clarity. And he had mistaken her presence in that moment as something meaningful for him, when in reality she was simply someone who witnessed a truth he couldn't hide anymore. "Ryan," she said softly, "you need to stop looking outside your marriage for direction. Whatever is broken, you must deal with it where it started. Not here. Not with me." He took a slow breath, and for the first time he seemed to accept what she was saying. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're right." He turned toward his house, taking a few steps before stopping again. "Thank you," he added without turning around. "For being honest, for not turning away." Emily watched him walk across the street. The air felt cold, but for some reason her heart felt warm and steady. She didn't regret speaking the truth. She didn't regret being kind. She didn't regret caring about Claire's pain. Ryan reached his front door. Claire opened it before he knocked, like she had been waiting. She didn't push him away. She didn't close the door. She simply stepped aside and let him in. Emily watched quietly. It wasn't a dramatic scene. There were no raised voices, no sudden tears. Just a people finally beginning a conversation they had avoided for too long. When the door closed behind them, Emily stood on her porch for a long moment. The night felt peaceful in a way she hadn't expected. She knew their marriage would still have challenges. She knew healing wouldn't happen overnight. But she also knew something important: Clara had found her voice. And Ryan had finally listened. Emily went inside, gently closing her door. She didn't know what the future held for any of them. But she felt something she hadn't felt since that night at the window. A sense of calm. She hadn't been chosen. She hadn't been pulled into someone else's mess. She had simply helped a people face the truth. And sometimes, she realized that was what love meant, choosing honesty over longing, compassion over expectation, and peace over confusion. The window across the street stayed dark that night. And for the first time in days, Emily finally slept without the weight of someone else's secrets on her heart.